In today's discussion, we will be talking about measuring the cost of living and talking about dealing with inflation. Since that's a big word that's going around in the news now, I figured we'll talk about inflation and how we use basic math to calculate the inflation rate. But before we do that, as we do every week, we want to go over the upcoming assignments that will be due. The first one that will be due is to complete the survey that's located in the modules area. You just go into the modules area for this class and then click on the video to see how to get into the surveys and then complete the survey. The next thing, all missing assignments and all assignments are due by December 17th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. And then for next week's class, we will be discussing what will be on the final exam. You also be expected to present uh, two or three slides from your e-portfolio or your portfolio project, and then we'll discuss how to upload your portfolio project to ePortfolio. Before we get into calculating um, inflation rates and things like that, give a brief definition of some terms that you'll hear and that you might be hearing nowadays in the news. The first term is Consumer Price Index, or abbreviated as CPI, or you might just hear it just called Price Index. This measures the cost of living for the consumers. Just think about some of the expenses that you might have in your everyday life. You have housing, you have food, you have groceries, you have medicine, you have transportation. These are part of your cost of living, what you need to live on. The next term is inflation. Inflation is the increase in money supply, which causes the increase in the price of goods and services. When back in 2021 when or 2020 when they started printing a lot of money, putting a lot of money supply into the economy, it was only amount of time a certain amount of time where all of that money supply that was just printed and pumped into the economy, where the prices were gonna increase, which we're seeing now. Regardless of who would have been in office, whether it was the Democrat that's in the office now or a Republican, we would have seen inflation because of all that money that was being printed out over the past year or so. The next term is the cost of living adjustment. This is the adjustment made to maintain a certain standard of living. The money that you had last year is not the same or doesn't have the same purchasing power as or as the money this year. It may be the same dollar, but that same dollar does not purchase the same amount of goods from 2020 to 2021. This is important. Cost of living adjustment is important when you start getting into contracts and long-term contracts and employment and things like that. An example of this would be for a student. If student A, which we'll call Josh, and student B, we'll call Jake. So we have Jake and Josh. Josh hires Jake to take notes for him. He'll pay him $50 per class. They sign a long-term contract for 5 years. So the whole time that Josh and Jake are in school, Josh is going to pay Jake $50 per every class that he prints out note or he does takes notes for him. Every class, again, Jake is going to receive $50 from Josh for a total of 5 years. Does this sound like a good deal or not? It right now it's a good deal, but 5 years later is not really a good deal because again, $50 today will not be able to buy the same amount of goods and services in 5 years from now. This is where COLA comes into play, where you want to include some type of automatic adjustment to the contract so that each year you're going to receive an increase in pay, or in this case, Jake would receive an increase in pay. So the first year is $50. If you put in the contract that every year you want a 3% or a 10%, let's say a 10% increase, every year you're going to add. So for the first year, 10% of 50 is $5. So in 2022, instead of just making $50 per class that Jake takes notes, he's going to make $55 because that's $5 in addition to $50. That's the 10% that you're adding in. So you want to put something in a contract where if you're making a certain amount of money this year, you want to make sure that you're getting that automatic adjustment in your pay annually to to keep up that standard of living that you're used to having. Because again, the money that you have today will not buy and pay for the same things, goods and services, the money 2 or 3 years down the line. And we'll do a couple of examples to show how this is calculated. When calculating inflation rate and consumer price index, we have to follow a few different steps and rules when calculating this. And this is the same, these are the same steps that the government uses to figure out what the consumer price index is and what inflation rate is. The first step is to fix the basket. What fixing the basket is, just think of when you go shopping, grocery shopping. You have a basket or you have a cart, whatever you want to call it. Fix the cart, fix the basket. But you have a basket that's full of goods. You need to be able to say, okay, I have this, these amount of goods, and these amount of items in my cart. So you want to make sure you have everything that's in your cart. You want to know what's in there, and you want to know the amount that's in there. The second step is to find the price of the basket items. Again, let's think of the grocery store. Each item doesn't cost the same. There's a different price for milk than the price for eggs. There's a different price for eggs than the price for bread. So you have to know the price of each basket item. The third step is to compute the basket items or the basket's cost. To do that, depending on how many quantities or how many items you have, you'll have quantity one times quantity or price one plus quantity two times price two. If you have three items, you have to add on quantity three times price three plus how many ever other items and costs that you have. The fourth step is to choose a base year or a year that you're going to use to benchmark to find out whether or not the inflation rate went up or the inflation rate went down. The way you do that is you take the cost of the basket in the current year and you divide it by the cost of the basket in the base year or the benchmark year, and you multiply that by 100. That allows you to get the consumer price index or the CPI or the price index. Step five is you compute the inflation rate. Now, the inflation rate is going to generally, you're going to see it as a percentage, but you can see it as a decimal as well because we know how to convert percentages to decimals and decimals to percentage. But to compute that or to calculate that, you're going to take the consumer price index from this year, you're going to subtract it from the consumer price index from the previous year, and then you're going to divide that by the consumer price index of the previous year, and then you're going to multiply that by 100%. So this might sound confusing, but we're going to do an example to kind of put the steps into motion or into play so you can get a better idea of how we're calculating the consumer price index and also the inflation rate. So in our example, we have We're going to be checking the price differences or the price change or the inflation rate for basketballs and baseballs. We're going to use 3 years. We can use more than 3 years, but for simplicity and to not take up too much time, we're only going to be doing this for 3 years. We're going to do it from 2019 to 2021. So in our first step, the first step, I'm going to type it in here. Let's see. So step one, we're going to fix the basket. And what that means is we know that our basket is we have 5 basketballs and we have 10 baseballs. I'll probably want to make that bold. Step two, we want to find the prices of each item in our basket. So let's look in here, and we see the different prices for the different years. So for 2019, price of basketballs was $5. So we would do, let me type it in here, step two, find the prices of each item. So we know for 2019, and I'm going to put price 2019. We have 5 basketballs. So 5 basketballs times $5 because it's $5 for each basketball. And that equals $25. So that's the basketballs. And then for the baseballs, see how can we'll just put it right beside it. We have 10 baseballs, and this is a little unrealistic that basketballs are cheaper than baseballs, but we'll just say that the demand is high, supply is low for the baseball. So we have $10 per baseball. So we know that that is $100. So that's the price of each item. We know that for 2019, price of each item is $5 for the basketball and $10 for, and actually I just moved on to the step three, which is to compute the basket. So let me change this to step three. I'll move the step ahead. Compute the basket. And step two is easier. I just move forward, moved ahead a little bit, but insert. And let's see, step two is find the prices of each item so again, we'll do 2019 here. All right. So now we have step one, step two, step three done. Let me insert and we're going to move on to step four, where we're going to choose a base year, or remember, base year pretty much means a benchmark year. And then we're going to compute the CPI. So just for simplicity, we're going to use 2019 as our base year or our benchmark year. Benchmark year. Because 2019 is going to be our base year, there's never we won't be able to calculate a CPI for 2019 because that's the benchmark year. That's the one we're using to find out whether CPI went up or inflation rate went up or down. So what I've done is I computed the basket costs for 2019, 2020, 2021. You see 2019, the basket cost is $125 for basket. The basket cost for 2020 is $180, and the basket cost for 2021 is $235. So if we wanted to know the CPI for 2020, we'll do CPI, and in parentheses, we'll do 20. That's equal to the cost of the current year, which is 2020. So we'll do 180. We'll put $180 divided by the cost of the basket year, which is 125. Uh, 125, 125, okay. And then all of that is multiplied by 100. So let's go into our calculator. 180, 125. So 144. The CPI for 2020 is equal to 144. And we actually can do the CPI for 2019. And that's just simply let's see, what is it? 125. So it's just 125 over 125. And let me put the dollar sign so we don't get confused. Dollar sign divided by $125 times 100. And that's going to equal 100. And the CPI for 2021 is equal to, let's see, cost of the current year, which is $235 divided by, did it again. I keep hitting the backspace or the back arrow, divided by the cost of the base year, which is 125. Times 100. And let's do 235 divided by 125 is equal to 1.88 times 100, 188. All right, so that equals 188. Ooh, that shouldn't be at. That should be that. Okay, so now we have all 3 years with the CPI. We have 100 for CPI for 2019. We have 144 for the CPI for 2020. And we have 188 for the CPI for 2021. All right, now that we have our CPIs, the next move would be so step 5 is going to be calculate or compute the inflation rate. Let me get all of that typed in. For the inflation rate for 2019, we cannot calculate that because the base year or the benchmark year is 2019. So there's, I'll just put in here, can't calculate because it's the base year. However, we can calculate the inflation rates for um, 2020 and 2021. And to do that, we would take the CPI for 2020, subtract that by the CPI for 2019, and then multiply that by 100%. And I need to type that in there so everybody can see the equation that I'm using. So the inflation rate for 2020 is going to be 44%. The inflation rate for 2021 is you take the CPI for 2021, which is 188. Let me put that extra parentheses in there because we're going to need it. 188, and then we subtract it by the CPI from 2020, which is 144. And then we divide that by the CPI for the previous year, which is 2020. So that would be divided by 144. And then we will multiply all of that by 100%. So let's put that in our calculator. So we have CPI from 2021 minus the CPI from the previous year, which is 144 equals, and then we divide that by 100. That gives us 0.44. Is that the same thing? Yeah. And then times 100%. See if we have percentage. Yep. So let me use this calculator. I'm going to use the standard calculator. Minus 144. I'm just doing the calculation all over again on the standard calculator. Oh, okay. Divided by 144. So that gives us 0.330. 0.3005 times 100%. So it would be 30.5%. That would be the inflation rate for 2021. Now that's how you calculate the consumer price index as well as the inflation rate. So we did step 1, step 2. Step 3, we're going to move it, take it a little bit further, and we're going to compare the dollar value of the minimum wage from 2020 versus 2021. So let's say that we use the inflation rates that we calculated from this hypothetical basket of baseballs and basketballs that we have. If we wanted to use the CPIs and the inflation rates from that example, and we wanted to find out how much was maybe whatever the minimum wage was last year, we'll just say 825. What's that valued today in 2021? And the way that we do that is we use this equation right here where you take the dollar value from time A, which would be 2020. You divide that by the CPI of time A, which would be the time value or CPI for 2020. You multiply all of that times the dollar value for time B, which is what we're trying to figure out. So that becomes the X value. And you divide that by the CPI for time B. So we're going to put that in Microsoft Excel. So see, what's the dollar value of minimum wage of 2021, 2020 minimum wage, and we'll just say that that'll be $8.25 in 2021 using CPI from above example. And I'm only typing this out so you know where the numbers came from. So again, we're going to take the time value of A, which time value of A is just going to be 2020. So that would be $8.25. And I might be better off writing this. You just have to bear with my chicken scratch, but I'm going to write this out instead of typing it so you can understand what I'm talking about. So the time value of A, which is the $8.25 from 2020, and the CPI, we know the CPI for 2020 was 144, which is right here. And we multiply that times, let me make this a little bit longer. So we don't know, I'll just put a question mark there. Instead of using an X, I'll use a question mark because we don't know how much that 825 is worth in 2021 just yet. And then we use the CPI for 2021, which is 188. So we're just going to use basic math, multiplication, and things like that to come up with um, the value of what 825 is in 2021 now. So let's go ahead and do this. That equals, so we're going to cross multiply. So we're going to have 8.25 times 188, because I'm cross multiplying these two numbers times these two numbers. And you have to deal with my chicken scratch. So 188, and that's going to equal, we're going to use question mark instead of using X. So we have that times that, 144, because again, it's 144 times the question mark. Let me move down a little bit so you can see it. And that all equals, let me get the calculator out, 8.25 times 188. 1,500 equals, again, we have that question mark there, 144. So we need to get the question mark on the side by itself. So we'll have question mark equals, we need to divide both sides by, move this down a little bit. And let me erase this because I need a little bit more room. All right. So we're going to divide both sides by 144. So the question mark equals, so using the inflation rates that we got from our example above and our CPI, well, the CPI we got from our example up here, which might not be realistic in real life, but this is how it's kind of done, how they figure out how much the time value of money is from one year into the next. So that same $8.25, if we use the CPI that we got from our example, that same $8.25 is now $10.77 in the future. So that's how you figure out the different values based off of. So if you made a certain amount back in 1999, that same dollar isn't going to be worth the same amount of money it is now because it can't buy the same amount of stuff. All right, so we're going to move on to the next thing. Since we calculated CPI and we calculated the inflation rate, I wanted to show you how it's used um, in the real world, how you can use those calculations if you wanted to spend time using them. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to use the cost of living calculator to figure out the cost of living differences. And you can use this example. You say you're in your current location. So we're going to use Cleveland, Ohio, and we're going to say that your current salary is $50,000. And you're going to see, like, if you want to move to another city, this is a good way to find out if your money is going to purchase the same amount of things. So let's say our salary is $50,000 in Cleveland, Ohio. We need to find out what the equivalent salary needs to be if we decided to move to a new location. And we're going to use the cost of living calculator. So I'm going to put $50,000 here in the current salary. And we're going to go to the website. All right, so I said Ohio and Cleveland. Currently making, see, it says 50,000 here. Let's say we wanted to move to Manhattan, New York. We need to find out what the equivalent salary is. New York, and let's go to Manhattan. So, in order to maintain our cost of living of us currently making $50,000 in Cleveland, Ohio, and we wanted to move to New York, Manhattan, New York, we would need to make $127,570 just to maintain that same standard of living. And I need to get into here. So, new location, like I said, is Manhattan, NY, and the new equivalent salary is 127,570. And we can see that our groceries are more they're more expensive in New York. No, I don't. So we know our difference is it's 41% more. That's how much it costs for groceries. Housing is 556% more. So their housing, that would be your biggest expense in New York. Your utilities would only be 77%. Your transportation would be 28%, which you may or may not have to worry about, and the healthcare is the same because they have a pretty good public transportation system. So you might be able to, if you have a car now, you could ditch the car, but just know that your housing expenses are going to be more and the groceries are going to be a lot more. So that's how we use um, inflation rate and CPI. That's how it's calculated. That's how all this stuff is calculated, um, just by using the equations that we used back there. And as far as cost of living inflation, this is when we did the basket items, and then we figured out the minimum wage was 8.25, and how much is that worth now in 2020 or 2021. We can use the inflation calculator, which is located on the Bureau of Labor Statistics site. We're going to go to that. Let's see, control click. And if you've ever heard anyone say, back in my day, we only paid such and such for for milk or for gas, for a gallon of gas. And when they say that, it's because again, over time, your money does not pay for the same amount of goods and services it did in previous years if the inflation rate is increasing. So I'm not going to go through all of this. You can go through the average new car price and what it was like, um, what it's like now versus what it was your birth year. I will do maybe movie ticket prices, or no, average earning. We'll do that. So again, let's go in on the web's internet and let's say what's the average wage for Ohio? Average hourly wage in Ohio is 49. Wow, it's a lot more than I thought. Hmm, $49 per hour. Okay, so let's say that the average wage in Ohio, that's a lot of money. I didn't expect that number. $49 per hour. So if we use the birth year, I'm just going to use an arbitrary year. This is not my birth year, by the way. So we're going to put $49 here for December 2021. And we want to find out how much it was back in January. Let's just say 1976. So $49 today and what the same buying power is or was back in January 1976. Not available. Let's try November. Month, year selected. Please select a different combination. Interesting. I've never seen that happen before. Let's try October. Okay. So November doesn't work. Maybe it's too soon to find. Oh, that's right. It is too soon. They haven't calculated the inflation rate. So November or October 2021, if you were making $49 an hour, that would be have the same buying power back in January 1976 of $9.85. So back in 1976, if you made $9.85, is it 80? Yep. If you made $9.85 back then, you would now be making 49. That's the equivalent or the same buying power as $49 per hour now. So I won't. I'll be reviewing this in class tomorrow. We'll go over all of the averages tomorrow, but I just wanted to do one of these just to show you that how much value money was back then compared to what it is now. Last thing, as always, do your journal entry. You talk about what you learned in today's class, as well as if there's anything you would need me to review for next week's class. And the subject line is Math 201 with today's date and journal entry.